The courtroom was silent as Serena's voice rang out, trembling with desperation. "I want half of your money. I gave you everything." Kellen, calm and composed, rose to his feet. "Everything," he replied coldly. "You mocked me, abandoned me, and chose someone else's wealth over our family. You deserve nothing." His legal team presented damning evidence, texts, videos, and testimonies that dismantled her every claim. The judge's gavel fell, dismissing her lawsuit with prejudice. Serena's face crumbled as Kellen walked out, victorious and unshaken, leaving her in the ruins of her choices. But before we dive deeper into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more. The morning sun filtered through the slatted blinds of Kellen Hayes' home office, casting a warm golden glow that danced across the polished hardwood floor. The room was meticulously organized, a testament to the disciplined mind that worked within its walls. A sleek black desk sat at the center, supporting an array of monitors that hummed softly, each glowing with lines of cascading code. The faint scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the subtle metallic tang of electronics. Kellen's office was a sanctuary, a place where creativity met precision. Shelves lined with tech manuals and books on algorithmic theory framed the room, while minimalist decor emphasized functionality over flair. To his left, a corkboard pinned with handwritten notes and sketches revealed the evolution of his startup, a revolutionary payment processing platform poised to reshape the industry. As the sunlight crept higher, illuminating his focused face, Kellen's fingers moved with practiced efficiency across the mechanical keyboard. Each click resonated with purpose, his mind attuned to the rhythm of progress. The world outside was a distant hum. Inside this room, time seemed to pause, allowing him to pour every ounce of energy into the vision he'd been building for a decade. Kellen's eyes flickered momentarily to a photo tucked in the corner of his desk, a snapshot of a younger, more idealistic version of himself standing beside Serena Mororo. Her sharp, confident smile mirrored the ambition he once admired. The sight triggered a memory, pulling him back a decade to the early days of his career. At 26, Kellen had been a junior developer at a mid-sized tech firm, churning out code for uninspiring projects. His days blurred together until the day Serena walked into the office, a marketing consultant hired to improve the company's brand. She exuded confidence, her every word dripping with conviction. She didn't just walk, she strode, commanding attention without effort. They first spoke in the break room over bad coffee. "You're wasted here," she said bluntly, her sharp eyes scanning him. "You've got something most people don't, potential. But you'll never reach it if you stay comfortable." Her words lingered, igniting a spark Kellen hadn't realized he possessed. Over the weeks that followed, their conversations grew frequent and personal. Serena challenged him to think bigger, her charisma intoxicating. Their first dates were filled with discussions about ambition, success, and risk-taking. She painted vivid pictures of a future where they'd both rise above mediocrity. "You could be more than just another coder," she told him over dinner one night, her ruby-red lips curling into a smile that made his heart race. "You've got the talent to create something extraordinary, but you need to step out of this safety net." Those words became a mantra, echoing in his mind as he started sketching the first concepts for what would later become his startup. Serena's belief in him was magnetic, giving him the confidence to dream. Yet, beneath her encouragement was an undercurrent of expectation, a hunger for success that wasn't entirely his own. Kellen blinked back to the present, the faint glow of his monitors drawing him back. The lines of code scrolled endlessly, a tangible representation of the dream he'd built. But the once thrilling memory now felt hollow, overshadowed by what came later. Serena had once inspired him, but her belief in him had come with strings, tied tightly to her own aspirations. That revelation would come later, along with the cost of their partnership. He sighed, pushing the memory aside. There was no room for nostalgia now. The notification pinged softly at the corner of Kellen's primary monitor, pulling his attention momentarily from the debugging script on his screen. A small banner displayed the result of the latest transaction batch. The average Dow pay had declined by 5%. Processed successfully in the past hour. He allowed himself a rare smile, faint and fleeting, before clicking over to the company's financial dashboard. The numbers were undeniable. Payer Technologies, the platform he had poured a decade of his life into, was generating $250,000 in monthly revenue, and they hadn't even launched officially. Investors were clamoring for a piece of the action, the projections were shattering expectations, and the platform's algorithms were outperforming even his most optimistic simulations. It was everything he'd envisioned during countless sleepless nights, and more. Still, the victory felt bittersweet. His eyes shifted briefly to the closet across the room, where a brand new Tom Ford suit hung, tags still attached. He had bought it in anticipation of the company's official launch, imagining the moment he'd reveal his success to the people who once doubted him. A month ago, he had thought Serena would finally see the man she had underestimated. But now he saw that the approval he had craved for so long no longer mattered. The mechanical click of his keyboard echoed in the quiet room as he returned to the task at hand, refining the algorithm for transaction optimization. His mind, however, was split between the technical work and the weight of reflection. A knock at the door broke his concentration. Dan Rivers, his business partner and oldest friend, entered, holding a coffee cup in one hand and his tablet in the other. "Another batch just cleared, didn't it?" Dan asked with a grin, sinking into the chair opposite Kellen's desk. "I can see it on your face. How much this time?" $447,000 in an hour, Kellen replied, his tone measured. He leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. The system's running smoother than ever. Investors are doubling down. Danny's grin widened. "Man, do you realize what we've built here? This isn't just some payment processor. This is a juggernaut. You've taken every critique, every dismissal, and turned it into..." He gestured to the room, the monitors, the sprawling dashboard on Kellen's screen. "This." Kellen met his gaze. "You think they see it now?" "Who? Serena, Trevor, the whole damn neighborhood?" Dan leaned forward, his expression serious. "Oh, they'll see it soon enough. Trust me, once the media gets a hold of our numbers, they'll realize what they walked away from. And when they do," he smirked, "it'll be too late." The word struck a chord, but Kellen's thoughts drifted again. He remembered the first time Serena had called his work a hobby, a comment delivered so casually it had taken him years to recognize it for the barb it was. Then there were the dinner parties with neighbors like Trevor Walsh, whose wealth came not from creation, but inheritance. Trevor's words still echoed. Why build something new when you can buy something proven? The memory stirred something sharp in Kellen. He'd stayed up that night coding until dawn, channeling his frustration into the system that now ran like a well-oiled machine, processing transactions faster than anything on the market. His phone buzzed, breaking his reverie. A message from Serena. "Don't forget Brielle's dance showcase tonight. Try not to embarrass us with one of your cheap suits." His jaw tightened. He glanced at the Tom Ford suit again but didn't move to retrieve it. Instead, he deleted the message and turned to Danny. "Let them underestimate me," Kellen said, his voice low but resolute. "They'll see the truth soon enough." "Damn right they will," Dan replied, lifting his coffee in a mock toast. "To the official launch, to shutting up every single person who ever doubted you, and to making Trevor Walsh choke on his old money pride." Kellen allowed himself a rare laugh, brief but genuine. "Let's make it happen." As the day stretched into evening, Kellen remained in his office, a relentless drive propelling him forward. His thoughts oscillated between the triumph of his work and the sting of betrayal that had fueled it. The monitors before him displayed a cascade of successes, transaction numbers climbing, client retention metrics glowing green, and emails from investors eager to increase their stakes. Beneath it all, a single truth grounded him. Success wasn't just about money or recognition. It was about proving, to himself and to others, that he was capable of greatness. The doubts Serena had planted the ridicule from neighbors, the indifference of his own daughter. They had all underestimated him. Now, Kellen was no longer working to earn their approval. He was working for something far greater, his own vision, his own legacy. And as the glow of the monitors reflected in his steely eyes, it was clear he had no intention of slowing down. Kellen's phone buzzed on the desk, its faint vibration breaking the steady rhythm of his keystrokes. He glanced over, the screen lighting up with a text from Serena. Escape. Don't forget Brielle's dance showcase tonight. Try not to embarrass us with one of your cheap suits. His jaw tightened, the words cutting deeper than they should. He had grown used to Serena's constant critiques, but this one came with a familiar sting, a reminder of how far apart they had grown. For years, her dissatisfaction had bubbled beneath the surface, but now it flowed freely, in sharp, biting messages like these. Kellen leaned back in his chair, his eyes flicking toward the framed photo on the corner of his desk. It was from a simpler time. Brielle, just 7 years old, beaming in her first recital costume. Serena stood beside her, smiling brightly, her hand resting lightly on Kellen's shoulder. It was the last time he could remember them feeling like a real family. The memory washed over him, vivid and bittersweet. It had been a chilly December evening, the air crisp with the promise of snow. Brielle had begged them to come to her recital early so they could watch her warm up. Her excitement was infectious, her giggles echoing through the auditorium as she practiced her routine. Kellen remembered Serena's genuine smile that night, free of the tension that later came to define their interactions. Afterward, they had taken Brielle out for ice cream despite the freezing temperatures. She had danced around the parking lot, her little feet tapping out rhythms even without music. "You're a good father," Serena had said quietly, her hand brushing against his arm. For a moment, there had been no criticism, no judgment, just warmth. Live. The sharp ping of another text jolted Kellen back to the present. Brielle's gonna be performing solo. You might want to try showing some enthusiasm for once. Exercise. He sighed, pushing the memories aside. Enthusiasm? He was proud of Brielle, always had been. But Serena's messages carried an edge that made it impossible to respond without feeding into the tension. He turned his chair slightly, his gaze landing on the Tom Ford suit in the closet. It hung there, pristine and untouched, a symbol of a moment he once thought would bring his family back together. But that moment had passed, and Serena had made it clear she wasn't interested in his success unless it came wrapped in the trappings of wealth she admired in others. The comparisons had started subtly. "Did you see what Sarah's husband bought her for their anniversary?" Serena had asked one evening, scrolling through her phone. She turned the screen toward Kellen, showing a photo of an elaborate diamond necklace. He understands how to treat his wife. Kellen had brushed it off at first, attributing her comments to passing remarks, but they grew more frequent, more pointed. Trevor Walsh's name became a fixture in their conversations. His luxury cars, his sprawling estate, his family vacations to Europe. At the first dinner party at the Walsh estate, Kellen had felt distinctly out of place. Trevor had given them a tour of his car collection, each vehicle worth more than Kellen's annual salary at the time. He had noticed the way Serena's eyes lit up with envy, the way her laughter came too easily when Trevor cracked a joke. That night, as they drove home, Serena had been unusually quiet. When they finally stepped into their modest home, she turned to him, disappointment etched into her features. "We could have this too, you know," she said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "If you just pushed yourself harder, took some risks, but you're content to just coast." The words had stung, but Kellen hadn't responded. Instead, he spent the night in his office, pouring his frustration into the fledgling ideas for his startup. Mark. Now, Serena's dissatisfaction had taken root in Brielle as well. At 17, Brielle was no longer the curious, eager child who used to climb into his lap and ask him about his work. Her fascination with programming had been replaced by an obsession with designer clothes and social media. "Dad," she had said just last week, her tone heavy with exasperation, "can't you get a better car? Madison's dad just bought a Ferrari. It's embarrassing to be seen in your old truck." The words had hit him harder than he expected, not because of the car, but because of the shift in her values. She was parroting Serena, adopting the same disdainful tone, the same fixation on appearances. It felt like losing her all over again. Another text buzzed on his phone. This time it was Brielle. "Don't forget my allowance. Madison's dad is taking us shopping and I don't want to look broke." Ellen checked the time. 10:23 a.m. on a Thursday. "Shouldn't she be in school?" He typed a response. "Shouldn't you be in class?" "Oh." The reply came almost immediately. "Half day. Told you last week. God, do you even listen?" Her dismissive tone echoed in his mind long after the conversation ended. Helen stared at the lines of code on his monitor, his focus slipping as the memories weighed on him. The warmth and connection he once shared with his family had been eroded by Serena's relentless comparisons, her fixation on what they didn't have. And now, Brielle, his little girl, seemed to be following the same path, valuing status over substance. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. The numbers on his screen didn't lie. His work was paying off. Success was within reach, even if the people closest to him couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. He pushed back from his desk, crossing the room to glance at the Tom Ford suit one more time. The time for proving himself to Serena and Brielle had passed. Now, his focus was solely on proving something to himself. Kellen sat at his desk, staring at the text from Brielle on his phone. "Madison's dad is taking us shopping, and I don't want to look broke." The words burned in his mind, not just for their content, but for what they represented. A gulf that had grown between him and his daughter. It wasn't just the allowance request or the dismissive tone. It was the deeper realization that Brielle, once his curious, bright-eyed child, now saw the world through a lens shaped by materialism. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment things had changed. Brielle had always been inquisitive, spending hours in his office as a child, asking endless questions about his work. "How does the computer know what to do, Daddy?" she would ask, her wide eyes lighting up as he explained the basics of coding in ways she could understand. She'd even tried writing her first simple script under his guidance, laughing with glee when it worked. But somewhere along the way, that spark of curiosity had dimmed. Now her attention was consumed by designer labels, influencer culture, and the approval of her wealthier friends. And he couldn't deny that Serena had played a significant role in steering Brielle down that path. The shift had been gradual, like a slow tide eroding the foundation of their family. It began with small things, Serena's offhand remarks about their home or the car Kellen drove. "Trevor just remodeled their kitchen," she mentioned one evening over dinner, her tone casual but pointed. "They put in one of those imported Italian ranges. It's stunning. Makes ours look outdated." Kellen had brushed it off, but the comments became more frequent. Comparisons to Trevor Walsh and his family were woven into nearly every conversation. By the time the Walshes had hosted their first neighborhood dinner party, Serena's envy was palpable. She had spent weeks planning their outfits, ensuring they looked presentable enough to match Trevor and Eleanor's standard. During the party, Trevor had shown off his wine collection, boasting about rare vintages and casually mentioning the six-figure price tag of his latest acquisition. Kellen had stood quietly to the side, sipping a modest glass of red, while Serena laughed a little too loudly at Trevor's jokes. Later that night, Serena's disappointment was clear as they walked to their car. "You don't have to pretend that didn't bother you," she said, her voice sharp. "Don't you want more for us? For Brielle?" "We have plenty," Kellen replied evenly. "A home, security, and each other." "Plenty?" Serena scoffed, gesturing at their surroundings. "That's what someone says when they're settling." Those conversations had set the stage for Brielle's gradual transformation. As Serena grew increasingly vocal about what their family lacked, Brielle began to internalize those frustrations. Kellen noticed it in the way she spoke about her friends. "Madison's dad bought her a new car for her Sweet 16, Brielle said one day, scrolling through photos on her phone. "It's a Tesla. Isn't that cool?" Kellen, caught off guard, nodded absently. That's nice. But what's wrong with waiting until you're older to drive? Brielle had rolled her eyes. Seriously, it's not just about driving, it's about showing people you've made it. Madison says people actually judge you based on what car you show up in. Don't you get that? Her tone wasn't just impatient. It was tinged with disbelief, as if Kellen's values were incomprehensible to her. That moment stayed with him, a warning sign he couldn't ignore. The influence of her wealthier peers only grew. Serena's frequent lunches with Eleanor Walsh and the other socialites often included Brielle, who soaked in their world of designer handbags and luxury vacations. When Brielle started asking for specific brands, names that Kellen barely recognized, he realized how much her environment had shaped her priorities. "Dad, can you get me the new Chanel sneakers?" she had asked one evening, holding up a photo on her phone. Kellen glanced at the price tag and raised an eyebrow. $1,200 for a pair of shoes? Brielle, that's not reasonable. Her expression darkened. Madison has them. Everyone has them. You wouldn't understand because you don't care about how people see us. That's not true, he replied, keeping his voice calm. I care about the example I set and the values I teach you. Shoes like these won't define your worth. Well, they do to other people, she snapped before storming off. Conversations like that became more frequent. Each one left Kellen feeling more isolated, like he was fighting a losing battle against a tide of materialism and societal pressure. The Brielle he remembered, the one who had once been fascinated by how things worked and delighted in solving problems, was slipping further away. Serena, instead of helping bridge the gap, only widened it. Her constant comparisons and subtle digs at Kellen's choices fueled Brielle's growing disdain. You're holding us back, Serena had said bluntly during an argument one night after Brielle had gone to bed. You're so focused on this startup of yours that you've forgotten how to provide for us now. Startup is providing, Kellen shot back. It's paying for this house, for Brielle's school, for the life we live. Barely, Serena retorted. Meanwhile, Madison's family just spent the summer in Europe. First class everything. What did we do? Stay here and eat takeout because you were working? Kellen had clenched his fists, swallowing his frustration. There was no point in arguing. Serena didn't see the long-term vision, only the immediate comparisons. The emotional distance between Kellen and Brielle deepened as Serena and their daughter became more aligned. They shared inside jokes about fashion and social events, often leaving Kellen feeling like an outsider in his own home. One evening, Kellen overheard them talking in the living room. Dad doesn't get it, Brielle said, her tone dismissive. He's so obsessed with his computers, he doesn't even notice what's important. Serena's laugh was quiet but complicit. You're not wrong. But that's why we're here, sweetheart, to show him what real ambition looks like. Kellen stood frozen in the hallway, the weight of their words sinking in. It wasn't just about wealth anymore. It was about respect, and he could feel their slipping further away. By the time Serena and Brielle began openly favoring Trevor Walsh's family as role models, Kellen knew the dynamic had shifted entirely. Brielle no longer looked to him for guidance or validation. Instead, she sought approval from Serena and her wealthier peers. And Kellen, for all his determination and hard work, was left in the shadows, trying to hold on to a connection that was slipping through his fingers. As he sat in his office that evening, the glow of his monitors illuminating the room, Kellen felt the full weight of his isolation. He wasn't just building a company. He was building a lifeline, something that would outlast the fleeting priorities that had consumed Serena and Brielle, something that would prove, once and for all, that his values, his persistence, and his vision were more than enough. But for now, the divide between them felt insurmountable. And though the pain of it cut deep, Kellen resolved to focus on what he could control: his work, his future, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he was building something that no one, not even the people he loved most, could take away from him. The quiet hum of Kellen's office was broken by the faint sound of voices drifting through the slightly open window. He paused mid-keystroke, the familiar tone of Serena's voice catching his attention. She was outside, pacing the driveway, her phone pressed to her ear. The conversation, initially muffled, grew clearer as she moved closer to the house. "Yes, everything's arranged," Serena said, her voice low and confident, tinged with the kind of smug satisfaction Kellen had come to dread. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He's too wrapped up in his precious computer programs." Kellen froze, the words sinking in like stones. He leaned back in his chair, his pulse quickening as he strained to hear more. Serena's voice was sharper now, deliberate, each word like a calculated move in a game he hadn't realized he was losing. "The movers will handle it while he's in his office," she continued. "By this time tomorrow, Brielle and I will be settled in Beverly Hills." "And Kellen?" She laughed softly, a sound that felt colder than anything he had ever heard from her. "He'll be nothing but an unfortunate memory." Kellen's stomach churned as the weight of her words settled over him. He shifted his gaze to the photo on his desk, the one of him, Serena, and a younger Brielle, all smiling in what now felt like a cruel illusion. He wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding, but Serena's tone left little room for doubt. The betrayal was deliberate, and it wasn't just hers. "Brielle's completely on board," Serena added. "She understands what a loser her father is. Of course she does. I've made sure of that." The air seemed to leave the room. Kellen felt as if he'd been punched in the chest. Brielle, his little girl, his curious, tech-loving daughter, had turned against him. The bright, eager child who used to sit on his lap and ask about his work was now part of a plan to leave him behind. Later that evening, Kellen sat in the living room, waiting for Serena to come inside. His mind raced with the details of what he had overheard, trying to make sense of how things had come to this. The front door opened and Serena walked in, phone still in hand, her demeanor as composed as ever. "Kellen," she said, barely glancing at him as she kicked off her designer heels. "You're still working? You should take a break sometime." He didn't respond immediately, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. How long had she been planning this? How much of what they shared had been a lie? Serena finally noticed his silence and raised an eyebrow. "Is something wrong?" He chose his words carefully. "I overheard you on the phone earlier." "I overheard you on the phone earlier." For a split second, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, perhaps, but it was quickly replaced by a cool mask of indifference. "Oh? And what did you overhear?" "Enough," he said evenly, his voice quieter than he intended. "Enough to know about the movers, about Brielle, about Asher." Her expression hardened and she crossed her arms. "Then I guess we can skip the pretense. You weren't supposed to find out until tomorrow." The casual cruelty of her admission stunned him. "You were just going to take Brielle and leave? No explanation? No discussion?" Serena shrugged, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. "What's there to discuss, Kellen? You've been checked out for years. You think I don't notice how much time you spend in that office, pouring your energy into some pipe dream? Meanwhile, Brielle and I have been waiting for you to wake up and realize what you're losing." "What I'm losing?" Kellen's voice rose, incredulous. "I've been working to build something for us, for all of us, and this is how you repay me?" Serena scoffed. "You call that building something? Playing entrepreneur while real men like Asher are out there making actual money? You're pathetic, Kellen, always have been." The words hit like a physical blow, but it was her next sentence that cut the deepest. "He looks work serious," the doctor said. "Rubrio sees it too," Serena continued. "She knows you'll never measure up. That's why she's coming with me. She deserves better." Kellen's fists clenched at his sides. "You've poisoned her against me." "No," Serena said, her voice cold and deliberate. "I've shown her the truth." The following morning, Kellen woke to the sound of movement downstairs. Boxes were being packed, furniture shifted. He stood at the top of the stairs, watching as the movers carried out pieces of their life together, each item another reminder of how quickly it was all unraveling. Brielle appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She glanced up at him briefly before looking away, her expression unreadable. "Brielle," Kellen called out, his voice breaking slightly. "We need to talk." "What's there to talk about?" she replied, her tone flat. "Mom already explained everything." "She explained her version of things," Kellen said, descending the stairs. "But I want to hear from you. Is this what you really want?" Brielle hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "It's what's best for us, Dad. You don't get it. You're too focused on your company to see how miserable we've been." "Miserable?" Kellen echoed. "You think I've been working this hard for myself? Everything I've done has been for this family. For you." A new sound. Her gaze hardened. "If that were true, you'd be here for us, not locked away in your office." "I've been building something that could change our lives," he said, his voice pleading now. "You used to understand that. You used to believe in me." "That was before I realized belief doesn't pay the bills," Brielle snapped. "Madison's dad buys her everything she wants. He takes her on trips, throws her parties. Meanwhile, I can't even get the shoes I want without a lecture about values." Kellen stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down on him. This wasn't just Serena's influence. Brielle had made her own choice, and that choice wasn't him. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said quietly, stepping aside to let her pass. "But know this, once you walk out that door, things will never be the same." Brielle hesitated for a fraction of a second, her eyes flicking toward his. But then she adjusted her bag and walked out, leaving Kellen standing alone in the empty hallway. Hours later, the house was eerily quiet. Kellen sat in his office staring at the financial dashboard on his monitor. The numbers glowed brightly, evidence of his hard work, his vision, his success. But they felt hollow now, overshadowed by the emptiness in his chest. Serena's words echoed in his mind. "You're nothing but a memory." He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. If that's how they wanted to see him, so be it. He would let them go, let them believe he was a failure. But when the time came, when his success was undeniable, they would realize the truth. And by then, they'd find themselves on the outside, looking in. Kellen sat in the dim light of his office, the silence pressing in around him like a heavy weight. The faint hum of his computer monitors was the only sound, a quiet reminder of the world he had built within these walls. Every fiber of his being demanded action, to storm out, to confront Serena and Brielle, to demand an explanation that might somehow ease the ache in his chest. But he didn't move. He simply sat there, his hands gripping the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. The betrayal felt like a wound, raw and unrelenting. The people he had loved most, his wife, his daughter, had not only abandoned him, but had done so with scorn. Serena's voice replayed in his mind, her cutting words about his ambition, her laughter as she called him a failure. Worse, Brielle's cold dismissal echoed louder still. She had chosen Serena's vision of wealth and status over the values he had tried to teach her. But Kellen knew anger wouldn't serve him now. He could feel it bubbling beneath the surface, a fiery mix of pain and resentment, but giving into it would accomplish nothing. Slowly, deliberately, he exhaled, forcing the tension from his body. He couldn't change their choices, he could only control his own. He turned to his computer screens, the bright glow illuminating his face. The financial dashboard displayed the numbers that had once filled him with pride, $250,000 in monthly revenue, and growing. Investors were lining up. The platform's performance exceeded every projection, and the launch was just weeks away. These were the fruits of his labor, the validation of every late night and every sacrifice he had made. The anger began to transform, cooling into something harder, sharper. Resolve. They had underestimated him. Serena had called him a dreamer, a man with no spine. Brielle had accused him of being disconnected, out of touch with what mattered, but Kellen knew better. His work mattered. His vision mattered, and he would prove it, not through words or confrontation, but through success so undeniable it would echo in every corner of the life they had chosen to leave. The sound of the door opening broke his thoughts. Dan Rivers stepped into the office, his sharp eyes immediately taking in Kellen's stiff posture and the tension in his expression. He held 2 coffees, setting one down on the desk before pulling up a chair. "You look like you've been through hell," Danny said bluntly, leaning back and studying his friend. "Want to tell me what's going on?" Kellen hesitated, his fingers tapping lightly against the desk. "Serena and Brielle are leaving," he said finally, his voice even but tight. "They've been planning it for months." Serena hesitated, then said. Dan raised an eyebrow. "And you found out how?" "I overheard her," Kellen admitted. "She's taking Brielle moving in with Asher Calloway. Movers are coming tomorrow." For a moment, Dan said nothing, his expression shifting from surprise to anger. "That's cold, even for her." He looked thoughtful. Kellen nodded, his jaw tightening. "She said I'm a failure, that Brielle deserves better. And apparently, Asher is the better option." Dan let out a low whistle. "So what are you going to do?" "Nothing," Kellen said firmly. "Let them go. They've made their choice." "Nothing?" Dana leaned forward, disbelief etched across his face. "Kel, you can't just let them walk all over you like this." Kellen's gaze hardened, his voice steady. "I won't beg. I won't argue. If they think I'm a failure, fine. I'll let my success speak for itself." Danny studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right," he said finally. "Then let's make sure that success is loud enough to drown out every word they've ever said." The next few days passed in a blur of focused work. Kellen threw himself into his startup with a renewed sense of purpose. The pain of Serena and Brielle's departure lingered, but he channeled it into productivity, using the hurt as fuel to drive him forward. Every keystroke felt deliberate, every decision infused with a quiet determination. He refined the platform's algorithms, ensuring their efficiency exceeded anything else on the market. He reviewed the investor pitch deck, fine-tuning every detail to perfection. And he worked late into the night, the glow of his monitors casting long shadows across the room. But it wasn't just the work. Kellen began to change, subtly but unmistakably. The man who once sought validation in Serena's approval was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who no longer needed external affirmation. He had always believed in his vision, but now he believed in himself. One evening, Daniel stopped by the office again, a bottle of whiskey in hand. He poured 2 glasses, sliding one across the desk to Kellen. "To the launch," Dan said, raising his glass, "and to proving every doubter wrong." Kellen clinked his glass against Danny's, a small but genuine smile tugging at his lips. 2. Building something that lasts. They drank in silence for a moment before Danny spoke again. "You know, this is going to sting for a while, what they did." Kellen nodded. "I know. And you're okay with just letting it be." "I'm not letting it be," Kellen said, his voice firm. "I'm just not wasting my energy on anger. They don't believe in me? Fine, but I believe in me. And when they realize what they walked away from, it'll be too late." Danny grinned. "That's the Kellen I like to see." As the days turned into weeks, the distance between Kellen and his old life grew. Serena and Brielle moved out, leaving behind only faint echoes of the family they had once been. But Kellen didn't dwell on the loss. He had a company to build, a dream to realize, and a point to prove, not to them, but to himself. The official launch of Pyre Technologies loomed closer, and the excitement around the platform was palpable. Articles began to circulate in tech circles about the innovative payment system, and investors started referring to Kellen as a rising star in the industry. One night, as Kellen reviewed the latest revenue reports, his phone buzzed with a text from Dan. $300K this month. We're crushing it. Kellen allowed himself a moment of pride. The numbers didn't just represent financial success. They were proof of everything he had worked for. Every late night, every sacrifice, every ounce of doubt he had overcome. It was all worth it. As he sat back in his chair, the faint hum of his office filling the silence, Kellen felt a sense of clarity. He didn't need Serena's approval. He didn't need Brielle's validation. His work, his perseverance, and his integrity were enough. And when the world finally saw the empire he had built, there would be no room for anyone to question his worth again. The rumble of a moving truck pulling into the driveway jolted Kellen from his work. He sat frozen in his office chair, staring blankly at the glowing monitor before him. The soft clatter of footsteps and muffled voices followed, each sound sharp and intrusive against the heavy silence of the house. He didn't move. Instead, he listened as the fabric of his life was unceremoniously unraveled. Boxes being dragged across the floor, drawers opening and slamming shut, voices giving instructions. The occasional laugh from the movers felt like a cruel mockery of the weight of the moment. Kellen glanced at the clock on the wall, 9:47 a.m. It was earlier than he had expected, but maybe that was intentional. Serena always had a knack for strategic exits, and this one seemed no different. She wanted to leave quietly, efficiently, without confrontation, just another loose end to tie up before stepping into the life she believed she deserved. Finally, after what felt like hours, Kellen stood. His legs felt heavy as he walked to the window of his office. From the second floor, he had a clear view of the driveway. The movers were loading the last of the boxes into the truck. Serena stood nearby, clipboard in hand, her designer sunglasses shielding her eyes. She looked every bit the composed, confident woman she had always projected to the world. Her demeanor was professional, detached, as though this were nothing more than a business transaction. Then his eyes fell on Brielle. She was standing by the open door of the truck, scrolling through her phone. Her posture was casual, her expression indifferent. The bright, eager little girl who used to beg him for bedtime stories, who used to sit on his lap and ask him to explain lines of code, was gone. In her place was a teenager who barely glanced at the house she was leaving behind. Kellen's throat tightened as he leaned against the window frame, watching the scene unfold. He felt rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to speak. What could he say that he hadn't already said? What words could undo the months of manipulation, the years of Serena's subtle yet corrosive influence on their daughter? A sharp knock at the office door pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Dana standing there, concern etched into his features. "They're really doing it, huh?" Dan said quietly, stepping into the room. Kellen nodded, his jaw tight. "Looks like it." Dan hesitated, glancing out the window. "You want me to say something? Stop them?" "No," Kellen said firmly, though his voice wavered. "Let them go. This is their choice." Dana studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right," he said, his voice heavy. "But if you need anything." "I'll be fine," Kellen replied, though he wasn't sure if it was true. He turned back to the window, his eyes following the movers as they closed the truck's back doors. As the truck rumbled to life, Serena stepped toward the passenger door. For a moment she paused and looked up at the house, her expression unreadable. Kellen wondered if she felt even a flicker of regret, a moment of doubt about what she was leaving behind. But then she turned and climbed into the truck, her movements decisive. Brielle followed, pausing briefly at the edge of the driveway. She looked back at the house, at the window where Kellen stood, and their eyes met. For a fleeting second, Kellen thought he saw something in her expression. Hesitation? Guilt? Pain? But just as quickly, she looked away, slipping into the truck without a word. The silence that followed was deafening. Kellen stood at the window long after the truck had disappeared down the street, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. His chest felt hollow, as though the act of watching them leave had carved something out of him. He returned to his desk, his movements mechanical, his mind replaying every moment that had led to this. Serena's sharp criticisms, her comparisons to wealthier families, her dismissal of his work. Brielle's gradual shift from an adoring daughter to a distant, materialistic teenager. And now, the final blow. Their departure, their rejection of everything he had tried to build for them. The knock came again. Dan, still there, poked his head through the door, Kellen, you sure you're good? I mean, this is... I'm fine, Kellen interrupted, his voice firmer this time. He didn't meet Danny's eyes as he sat down and opened his laptop. I've got work to do. Dan hesitated but finally nodded. All right, I'll be downstairs if you need me. Dan came downstairs, touching her arm, concerned. When the door closed, Kellen let out a long breath. He stared at the screen in front of him, the lines of code suddenly blurring together. His chest tightened, but he forced the emotion down, compartmentalizing the pain as he had done so many times before. An hour later, his phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Serena. We're on our way. Please don't contact us. It's better this way. The message was clinical, devoid of emotion, as though she were confirming a canceled appointment. Kellen stared at it for a long time before finally deleting it. He turned back to his computer, the glow of the screen casting shadows across his face. The hurt was still there, raw and biting, but beneath it, something else was beginning to take shape. Resolve. They had chosen to leave, to dismiss him as a failure. But Kellen knew better. He knew the value of what he was building, the potential of the platform he had spent years perfecting, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that success would be the ultimate response. That night, as the house settled into an unnatural quiet, Kellen worked late into the hours, the clatter of his keyboard filling the empty space. He didn't dwell on Serena's words or Brielle's indifference. He didn't replay their departure in his mind. Instead, he poured everything he had into his work, each keystroke a declaration of his determination. They thought he was a failure. They thought they could walk away and leave him behind. But Kellen Hayes wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Kellen sat at his desk, bathed in the soft glow of his monitors, the hum of the machines a quiet companion in the stillness of the night. The pain of Serena and Brielle's departure lingered like an open wound, but something else had begun to take root within him. Determination. The numbers on his screen told a story that no one could dismiss. Payor Technologies was thriving, and its growth showed no signs of slowing. He scrolled through the latest reports, his eyes scanning the projections. The platform had processed another $200,000 in transactions that day alone, surpassing even his most optimistic expectations. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The work wasn't just a distraction, it was a lifeline, a beacon pulling him out of the darkness. A sharp knock at the door broke his focus. Dame Rivers entered, carrying a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. His tie was loosened, and his expression was a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "You're still here," Dan said, setting the bottle on the desk. "Not that I'm surprised." Kellen offered a faint smile. "Where else would I be?" DNA poured 2 glasses, sliding one across the desk. "To the grind," he said, raising his glass. "To building something that lasts," Kellen replied, clinking his glass against Danny's before taking a sip. Dan leaned back in his chair, studying Kellen. "You're quiet tonight, more than usual." Karen smiled. Kellen set his glass down, his fingers tapping lightly against the desk. "I've been thinking." "About them?" Donna asked, his tone cautious. "For a while, yes," Kellen admitted. "But now, no. I'm thinking about what comes next." Dan raised an eyebrow. "What's the plan?" Kellen's voice was calm, deliberate. "Success." The next morning, Kellen and Dan met with a group of investors in the sleek conference room of a downtown skyscraper. The city skyline stretched out behind them, a fitting backdrop for the vision they were about to present. Dan opened the meeting with a pitch that was polished and persuasive, outlining Payor Technologies' progress and its potential to disrupt the payment processing industry. Kellen listened, his hands folded in front of him, waiting for his turn to speak. When Dan finished, the room turned to Kellen. He stood, his movements deliberate, his gaze steady. "Payor isn't just another payment processor," he began, his voice firm but measured. "It's a redefinition of what payment systems can be. Faster, more secure, and infinitely scalable. The algorithms we've developed aren't just ahead of the competition, they're years ahead, and we're just getting started." He paused, letting his words settle. "I know there are risks. Every startup comes with them. But look at the numbers. Look at the growth. This isn't just an idea, it's a revolution, and you have the chance to be part of it. The investors exchanged glances, their interest evident. Questions followed, sharp, probing questions about scalability, market saturation, and competition. Kellen answered each one with precision, his confidence unwavering. By the end of the meeting, the investors were nodding, their skepticism replaced with enthusiasm. "We'll double our commitment," one of them said, rising to shake Kellen's hand. "This is something special." As the room emptied, Danny turned to Kellen, a grin spreading across his face. "You nailed it." Kellen allowed himself a small smile. "We nailed it." Later that evening, back in his office, Kellen sat at his desk, reflecting on the day's events. The success of the meeting was a turning point not just for the company, but for him personally. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of clarity, a renewed focus. The door creaked open, and Dan appeared, a triumphant glint in his eye. He held up his phone, the screen glowing with a new message. "Guess who just emailed? An angel investor from Silicon Valley. He wants in." Kellen arched an eyebrow. "How much?" "Enough to triple what we just secured," Danae said, sitting down across from him. "He's been following our progress. Says he doesn't want to miss the boat." Kellen leaned back in his chair, a rare moment of satisfaction washing over him. "It's happening." "It's more than happening," Danny replied, pouring another glass of bourbon for them both. "It's taking off, and you know what? It's because of you. You never gave up, not even when everyone else would have folded." Kellen stared at his glass, his thoughts drifting to Serena's words. "You're a failure. Brielle deserves better." He set the glass down, his voice steady but laced with steel. "Success is the best revenge." Dana smirked, raising his glass. "To revenge." "To the future," Kellen corrected, his gaze firm. "To proving them all wrong." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of progress. Payor Technologies secured additional funding, its valuation skyrocketing as news of its innovation spread. Kellen worked tirelessly, perfecting every aspect of the platform, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. The team expanded, hiring some of the brightest minds in the industry. Kellen led them with quiet determination, his focus unrelenting. The pain of the past didn't fade, but it no longer consumed him. Instead, it drove him, pushing him to achieve more, to build something undeniable. One night, as Kellen reviewed the latest reports, his phone buzzed with a text from Danny. "100K in transactions today. We're officially crushing it." Kellen smiled, a rare but genuine moment of pride breaking through. He replied simply, "Just the beginning." He leaned back in his chair, the glow of his monitors illuminating his face. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a while, Kellen felt certain of one thing. He was on the right path. The internal memos, Kellen thought. Let Serena and Brielle think what they wanted. Let the world doubt him. When the truth of his success was undeniable, they would all see. And by then, Kellen Hayes would be too far ahead to look back. The quiet hum of Kellen's office filled the air, a low, steady rhythm that mirrored his heartbeat as he stared at the glowing screen in front of him. The cascading lines of code offered a strange solace, a sense of control in a world that had unraveled so quickly. He had spent hours here since Serena and Brielle left, channeling every ounce of anger, hurt, and betrayal into the one thing that had never failed him, his work. Each keystroke was deliberate, purposeful, a tangible declaration of his determination. Kellen had always believed in his vision, but now it wasn't just about building a successful company. It was about proving, to himself more than anyone, that the value Serena and Brielle failed to see in him wasn't just real, it was immeasurable. Danny arrived later that evening, carrying a bag of takeout and a look of concern. He set the bag on the edge of the desk and dropped into the chair across from Kellen. "You've been holed up in here for days," Dan said, eyeing him carefully. "When's the last time you slept?" Kellen didn't look up, his fingers moving across the keyboard. "I'm fine." "Yeah, you look fine," Dan replied dryly, like someone who's trying to outrun a train. Kellen paused, his hands hovering over the keyboard. He glanced at Danny, his expression unreadable. I have to keep moving. Why? Dan asked, leaning forward. What are you trying to prove? Kellen hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on him. Finally, he sat back, exhaling deeply. They didn't just leave, Dan. They left because they didn't believe in me. Serena called me a failure. Brielle, she didn't even hesitate. Danny's jaw tightened, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with quiet anger. That's on them, not you. Maybe, Kellen said, his voice low. But I can't let that be the end of it. I can't let them define me like that. Danny studied him for a moment, before nodding. So prove them wrong. Not for them, for you. Kellen's gaze hardened, a spark of resolve igniting in his eyes. I will. That night, Kellen worked until dawn, fueled by a singular focus. He pored over every detail of the platform, optimizing algorithms, refining features, and ensuring that the system could handle the rapid growth they were experiencing. Each adjustment, each improvement, was another step toward the future he envisioned, a future where his success would be undeniable. As the sun began to rise, casting soft light across his office, Kellen sat back and surveyed his work. The pain of Serena and Brielle's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed him. Instead, it had become fuel, driving him forward with a clarity and determination he hadn't felt in years. The following weeks were a whirlwind of progress. Investor meetings, team expansions, and late-night brainstorming sessions filled Kellen's days. His intensity was unmatched, his focus unrelenting. The company's growth mirrored his own transformation, each milestone a testament to his perseverance. One afternoon, Kellen and Danny met with a new group of investors. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as the two men outlined their vision for Payer Technologies. Kellen's presentation was precise and compelling, his confidence radiating with every word. When the meeting concluded, one of the investors approached him, extending a hand. Mr. Hayes, I have to say, your passion is contagious. I've seen a lot of startups, but this one feels different. You've got something special here. Kellen shook his hand, a small but genuine smile breaking through. Thank you. I believe in what we're building. As the investors filed out, Dan clapped Kellen on the back. You're killing it, man. They're practically throwing money at us. Kellen's smile faded slightly. Good. Let's use it wisely. That evening, back in his office, Kellen allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk, the one of him, Serena, and Brielle from years ago. For a long time, that photo had been a symbol of what he thought he was working for. But now, it felt like a reminder of a different lesson, that success wasn't about proving his worth to them. It was about proving it to himself. He reached for the photo, hesitating briefly before setting it face down on the desk. His focus needed to stay on the future, not the past. As the days turned into weeks, Kellen's work became his sanctuary. The numbers on his financial dashboard continued to climb, each transaction a small victory. The team expanded further, bringing in top talent from across the industry. Every decision Kellen made was deliberate, guided by the same unyielding drive. One night, Danny stopped by the office with another update. We just cleared $600K this month, he said, dropping into the chair across from Kellen's desk. That's double what we did last month. Kellen nodded, his expression calm but resolute. It's a good start. Danae smirked. A good start? Kellen, this is insane growth. You should be celebrating. I'll celebrate when we hit 1 billion, Kellen replied, his voice steady. Dan raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, Mr. Relentless. But, seriously, this is big. You've built something incredible here. Kellen met his gaze, his expression softening slightly. We've built something incredible. Denali grinned. You know, Serena and Brielle, They're going to hear about this eventually. They're going to realize what they left behind. That's Kellen's gaze hardened. Let them. By the time they do, it'll be too late. In the quiet of his office that night, Kellen reflected on how far he had come. The betrayal that once threatened to break him had instead become the foundation of his resolve. He no longer needed Serena or Brielle's validation. His work, his vision, and his unrelenting drive were enough. As he leaned back in his chair, the glow of his monitors illuminating the room, Kellen felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. He had found strength in his pain, transforming it into something extraordinary. And when the world finally saw what he had built, there would be no doubt that Kellen Hayes was a force to be reckoned with. The bright, polished lights of the downtown high-rise conference room reflected off the glass awards adorning the central table. Kellen Hayes stood at the head, flanked by Danny Rivers and their executive team, as journalists and photographers crowded the space. The announcement was historic. Payer Technologies had officially crossed a valuation of $1 billion. Kellen adjusted his tie, his face calm and composed, though the gravity of the moment was not lost on him. Just 5 years ago, this had been nothing more than a dream, a collection of lines of code and sleepless nights. Now, it was a tech powerhouse revolutionizing payment systems across industries. The world was finally taking notice. The magazine covers followed quickly. Forbes dubbed him tech's relentless innovator, with a cover story delving into his journey from junior developer to industry leader. The Wall Street Journal highlighted Payor's groundbreaking algorithms and their impact on global finance, while Time ran a profile titled The Billion-Dollar Visionary. Kellen found himself in demand, fielding interview requests and invitations to speak at major tech conferences. During one such interview, the host leaned forward, her tone curious but respectful. Kellen, Mr. Hayes, Payer Technologies has achieved what many startups can only dream of. To what do you attribute your success? Kellen smiled faintly, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. Persistence, a willingness to see past immediate obstacles and focus on the bigger picture. Any advice for those who look up to you as a role model? He paused, considering his words carefully. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. If you believe in what you're building, let that belief guide you. Everything else will follow. The response drew applause from the audience, but for Kellen, it was more than a soundbite. It was the truth he had lived by. While Kellen's star continued to rise, the cracks in Serena and Brielle's lives deepened. Serena's relationship with Asher Calloway, once a shining promise of wealth and status, had crumbled under the weight of his fraudulent empire. News of Asher's indictment on multiple counts of financial misconduct had spread like wildfire, forcing Serena to leave the luxurious Beverly Hills mansion she had fought so hard to attain. The sleek cars, designer clothes, and lavish parties were gone, replaced by courtrooms and unpaid bills. The private school Brielle attended dropped her from their roster, citing unpaid tuition. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Van Nuys, a stark contrast to the life Serena had envisioned. One evening, Serena sat at the small kitchen table, staring at a stack of overdue notices. Her once flawless nails tapped anxiously against the edge of the table as she scrolled through her phone, scanning headlines about Kellen's latest triumphs. Billion-dollar innovator Kellen Hayes expands Payor Technologies to global markets. Final question. The accompanying photo showed Kellen standing confidently at a podium, his suit tailored to perfection, the world hanging on his every word. Serena's fingers tightened around her phone. The man she had dismissed as a failure, whose ambitions she had mocked, was now gracing magazine covers. Meanwhile, she was juggling eviction notices and applying for jobs she felt were beneath her. Brielle wasn't immune to the fallout either. She sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through her social media feed, where Madison Walsh and other former friends flaunted their designer wardrobes and luxurious vacations. Brielle's envy was palpable, but it was mixed with something deeper: regret. One post stopped her cold. It was an article about her father. The headline read, "Kellen Hayes launches billion-dollar education initiative." The article detailed his plan to build technology training centers for underserved communities, a project aimed at empowering the next generation of innovators. A photo accompanied the piece, Kellen standing in a construction zone, sleeves rolled up, explaining his vision to a group of students. He looked confident, self-assured, and entirely unlike the man Brielle had dismissed. Her phone buzzed with a message from Madison. "OMG, why didn't you tell me your dad is famous now?" Brielle didn't respond. Instead, she set her phone down and stared out the window, her thoughts tangled. She had chosen wealth over loyalty, status over substance, and now she was left with neither. For Kellen, the contrast between his rise and their fall wasn't a source of satisfaction, but a quiet reminder of the choices that had led them all to this point. He didn't dwell on Serena or Brielle anymore. His focus was on the future, on expanding Payor Technologies, on making an impact that would outlast him. One afternoon, Danny walked into his office, holding a tablet. "You might want to see this," he said, setting it on the desk. Kellen glanced at the screen. It was a gossip site, featuring a photo of Serena leaving a courtroom. Her face tired, her once pristine appearance disheveled. The headline read, "Former tech titan's ex-wife faces financial struggles post-divorce." Kellen stared at the image for a long moment before sliding the tablet back to Danny. "Not my concern," he said simply. Danny raised an eyebrow. "Not even a little?" I asked. Kellen shook his head. "They made their choices. I made mine." Danny nodded, a hint of respect in his expression. "Fair enough." That evening, Kellen stood in his penthouse, the city lights sprawling out before him like a constellation. The past was behind him now, a series of lessons that had shaped him but no longer defined him. He had built something extraordinary, not for validation but for himself, for the belief that success, earned through perseverance and integrity, was the ultimate vindication. Somewhere in the distance, Serena and Brielle were undoubtedly grappling with the consequences of their decisions. But for Kellen, the only path was forward. He had an empire to grow, a legacy to cement. As he turned back to his desk, the glow of his monitors reflecting in his eyes, one thought lingered. The best revenge wasn't just success. It was thriving beyond anyone's expectations. And he had done just that. The courtroom was cold, its sterile walls and unyielding benches offering little comfort to those seeking salvation. Serena Moraro sat at the plaintiff's table, her once polished appearance a shadow of its former glory. Her hair was pulled back hastily, dark circles rimmed her eyes, and the designer outfit she wore, though still fashionable, no longer carried the effortless elegance she once exuded. Across from her sat Kellen Hayes, his demeanor calm, composed, a man entirely in control. The judge called the court to order, and Serena's attorney began her argument, his voice straining to mask the weak foundation of the case. "Your Honor," the lawyer started, addressing the bench. Mrs. Moraro supported Mr. Hayes during the formative years of Payor Technologies. She provided emotional and practical contributions that were integral to the company's success. As such, she is entitled to compensation. Kellen's attorney, Michael Chun, rose smoothly. His sharp suit and measured tone exuded confidence. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Ms. Moraro did not support Mr. Hayes but actively undermined him. We have video recordings, text messages, and witness testimonies to substantiate this." Serena's mind raced as Michael spoke, each word unraveling her carefully constructed narrative. Her plan had been straightforward. Cast herself as the long-suffering spouse who had sacrificed everything for her husband's success. But now, faced with the cold precision of Kellen's legal team, she realized how flimsy her claims truly were. Michael presented his first piece of evidence, a video taken during a country club event. The courtroom filled with Serena's own voice, light with laughter yet heavy with disdain. "My husband? Oh, he plays with computers all day, calling himself an entrepreneur. It's embarrassing, really. A grown man acting like a college student with a startup dream. The room was silent as the video ended. Serena's face burned, and she avoided the judge's gaze. Michael continued, unfazed. We also have text messages sent by Ms. Mororo to friends and family, mocking Mr. Hayes' work ethic and ambition. Furthermore, we have documentation of her planning to leave the marriage months before Pyor's Technologies achieved success. At the defendant's table, Kellen watched Serena without a flicker of emotion. There had been a time when he would have bent over backward to appease her, to win her approval. That time had passed. Now, he listened as Michael methodically dismantled her claims, piece by piece. Mr. Hayes, the judge addressed him, do you have anything to add? Kellen stood, his voice steady. Your Honor, my company's success is the result of years of hard work and sacrifice. The plaintiff abandoned the marriage before this success became public. Her claim is not only baseless, but an insult to those sacrifices. From the gallery, Brielle watched the proceedings with wide eyes. She hadn't wanted to come, Serena had insisted. But now she couldn't look away. She felt torn, ashamed of the mother who had once seemed so strong and confident, but now appeared desperate and hollow. Yet a deeper shame burned in her chest, knowing she had played a part in betraying her father. Her thoughts swirled as the judge delivered the verdict. Serena's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. She was also ordered to pay Kellen's legal fees. Serena's composure cracked, her voice rising in protest. This isn't fair. I gave him everything. The judge's gaze was unyielding. Mrs. Mororo, the evidence clearly contradicts your claims. This court will not reward opportunism. You are dismissed. As the courtroom emptied, Brielle caught up to Kellen in the hallway, her voice trembling. Dad, wait. Kellen turned, his expression unreadable. What do you want? Brielle. She hesitated, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm sorry. Everything. I should have stayed. I should have believed in you. Kellen studied her for a long moment, his voice soft but firm. You made your choice, Brielle. Just like your mother. Now you have to live with it. Now, excuse me, Kellen interrupted, his tone final. He walked away, leaving Brielle standing alone in the cold corridor. That evening, Serena sat in their small apartment, staring blankly at a stack of unpaid bills. The court fees had left her finances in shambles, and no amount of pleading had swayed the judge. The walls, once lined with the luxury she had craved, now felt suffocating. The headlines on her phone didn't help. Pyor Technologies founder Kellen Hayes prevails in court against ex-wife. Brielle entered the room quietly, her face pale. Mom, she said hesitantly, what do we do now? Serena sighed, her voice hollow. We survive. Across the city, Kellen sat in his penthouse, the skyline a tapestry of lights stretching endlessly before him. He held a glass of whiskey in his hand, the amber liquid catching the glow of his monitors. The headlines were already buzzing with news of the trial, but he paid them little mind. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. It was simply justice served. Dana walked in, holding his own glass. So, that's done, he said, sitting across from Kellen. Feel any better? Kellen shook his head. Not really, but at least it's over. Danny raised his glass, to moving forward. Kellen clinked his glass lightly, to never looking back. As the night stretched on, Kellen returned to his work, the quiet hum of progress drowning out the echoes of the past. For him, the only path was forward, and he had no intention of slowing down. The knock on the door was hesitant, almost timid. Kellen glanced up from his work, his expression hardening as he crossed the room. Opening the door, he was met with Brielle's familiar face, though it carried none of the arrogance he remembered. Her eyes were red, rimmed with tears, and she looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of recent months had diminished her. Dad? she said softly, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" Kellen hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. She entered the apartment, her movements uncertain, and stood awkwardly near the edge of the room. The silence between them stretched, heavy and loaded with unspoken words. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," Brielle began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I needed to talk to you." Kellen crossed his arms, his face impassive. "What is it, Brielle?" She looked down, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I'm sorry. For everything. For how I treated you, for choosing Mom's lies over you. I... Her voice cracked, and she took a shaky breath. "I was wrong. You deserved better." Kellen's gaze didn't waver. He wanted to feel something. Anger, sadness, even pity. But all that remained was a dull ache. "You made your choice," he said evenly. "You prioritized wealth and appearances over family, over loyalty." "I was stupid," Brielle said, her voice desperate now. "I was caught up in everything Mom said, in everything I thought mattered. But it didn't. None of it did. And now that it's gone, you come to me," Kellen replied, his tone cold. "Is this about guilt, Brielle? Or regret?" Her silence was answer enough. Kellen sighed, stepping back toward his desk. "You can't undo what you did. Trust is earned, not given freely. And you broke mine." Brielle's tears fell harder as she whispered, "Isn't there any way to fix this?" "No," Kellen said firmly, his voice unyielding. "Not now. Maybe not ever." "Suh." As she turned to leave, her shoulders hunched in defeat, Kellen felt the pang of loss resurface. But he let her go, knowing that some bridges were better left burned. The polished glass of Kellen's new corporate headquarters reflected the sprawling city skyline, a testament to his growing empire. Inside, the buzz of productivity filled the air as employees hurried through the halls, their energy matching the meteoric rise of Pioneer technologies. Kellen stood in his corner office, the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as he reviewed the latest financial report. The numbers were staggering. Pioneer had broken into global markets, with revenue projections surpassing anything he could have imagined 5 years ago. A knock at the door broke his focus. Dan stepped in, holding a tablet. Was Bradley there before? "Another feature just launched in Europe," Dan said with a grin. "User engagement is through the roof. Oh, and Forbes wants to run a follow-up piece on your success." Kellen allowed himself a small smile, his gaze steady. "Schedule it for next month. Let's focus on the expansion for now." "You've come a long way, man," Dana said, setting the tablet down. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Kellen glanced out the window, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about feeling good. It's about building something that lasts." Across town, Serena sat on a worn leather chair in the lobby of a mid-tier real estate agency, clutching her resume. Her once immaculate appearance was frayed, her tailored blazer ill-fitted, her jewelry understated and borrowed from better times. She glanced at the clock on the wall, her nerves fraying with each passing minute. "Miss Morodo," the receptionist called, her tone perfunctory. Serena rose, forcing a confident smile that didn't reach her eyes. As she walked into the interview room, she couldn't help but glance at her phone, where a news notification flashed. Pioneer Technologies founder discusses billion-dollar success. The name Kellen Hayes stared back at her, a stark reminder of what she had dismissed. Her stomach churned as she silenced the notification and stepped into the room. Brielle, now 18, sat alone in their cramped apartment, her phone buzzing with messages from friends she no longer spoke to. She scrolled through social media, pausing on a post about her father. The article detailed his latest venture, a scholarship program for young tech enthusiasts. The photo accompanied the piece, Kellen, smiling and confident, surrounded by students eager to learn. She put the phone down and stared at the peeling paint on the walls. Her mother's choices had led them here, but Brielle couldn't shake the gnawing guilt of her own decisions. She had chosen to follow Serena, had mocked her father's dreams, and now she was left with nothing but regret. "Mom," she called out as Serena returned home, her shoulders slumped. "Did you get it?" Serena shook her head, setting her bag down with a sigh. "No, they said I'm overqualified." Brielle didn't respond, the familiar excuse falling flat. Instead, she whispered, "I want to see Dad." Serena's head snapped up. "Why? After everything, you think he'll just forgive you?" "I have to try," Brielle said, her voice trembling. "I can't keep living like this." A week later, Brielle stood outside Kellen's office building, clutching her phone nervously. She had tried calling him, but her messages went unanswered. Now, she was here in person, hoping to find the courage to walk through the glass doors. Inside, Kellen was finishing a meeting when his assistant appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hayes," she said cautiously, "your daughter is downstairs." Kellen stiffened, the words hanging in the air. He closed his laptop slowly, his face unreadable. "Tell her I'm busy." The assistant hesitated. She seemed, different. "Maybe you should, I said I'm busy," Kellen interrupted, his tone firm. "Send her away." Downstairs, Brielle waited, her heart sinking as the receptionist delivered the message. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her tone kind but resolute. "Mr. Hayes can't see you today." Brielle nodded, blinking back tears as she turned to leave. She had expected this, but the rejection still cut deeply. That evening, Kellen sat in his penthouse, staring at a photo on his desk. It was an old one. Brielle as a child, her face lit with curiosity as she sat on his lap, asking questions about his work. He had kept it, though he rarely looked at it anymore. The ache of betrayal was still there, but it was tempered by the life he had built without them. Danae entered, a glass of whiskey in hand. "I heard Brielle came by," he said, sitting across from Kellen. Kellen nodded, his expression guarded. "She did. And you sent her away." "I did," Kellen said, his tone even. "She made her choice, Dan. She walked away when it mattered most." Danny took a sip of his drink, studying his friend. "People change, Kellen. Maybe she's trying to fix things." "Maybe," Kellen replied, his gaze steady. "But some things can't be fixed." Danae didn't push further, sensing the finality in Kellen's voice. As the city lights twinkled outside his window, Kellen turned his attention back to his work. His empire continued to grow, a monument to his perseverance and vision. Serena and Brielle had chosen a different path, one shaped by short-sighted ambition and misplaced priorities. And now, they were living with the consequences. For Kellen, the choice was clear. The past was behind him, and the future was his to define. And he would do so with the same relentless focus that had brought him here, proving to himself and to the world that success was the best revenge of all. Kellen sat in his office, the skyline of the city stretching out before him, a gleaming reminder of how far he had come. The quiet hum of the room was interrupted by the soft buzz of his phone on the desk. A message from his assistant appeared on the screen. "Serena and Brielle are in the lobby. They're asking to see you." He stared at the words for a long moment, his face impassive. The message carried the weight of unresolved history, but it did not unsettle him, as it might have in the past. The choices had been made long ago, and the consequences had already been set in motion. Downstairs, Serena paced nervously in the lobby, her usual confidence frayed at the edges. Brielle sat quietly beside her, clutching her phone but not looking at it. The opulence of the building seemed to press down on them, a stark contrast to their modest lives now. "We'll see us," Serena said firmly, though her voice carried an edge of desperation. "He has to." "Mom," Brielle said softly, her tone uncertain. "What if he doesn't?" Serena didn't answer. She didn't have to. The fear in her eyes said everything. Upstairs, Kellen rose from his desk and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He watched the city below, the sprawling streets a reflection of the empire he had built from the ground up. His mind drifted briefly to the past, the moments when he had fought for Serena's approval. when he had believed Brielle's loyalty was unshakable. Those memories felt distant now, like a version of himself he no longer recognized. His phone buzzed again. This time, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Hayes, should I send them away?" Kellen turned from the window, his jaw tightening. "Yes," he said after a moment, "and make sure security knows they are not to return." The message was relayed, and a quiet tension filled the lobby as the receptionist approached Serena and Brielle. "I'm sorry," she said politely but firmly. "Mr. Hayes isn't available, and he's asked not to be disturbed." Serena's expression faltered, and she glanced at Brielle, who looked down, her face pale. For a moment, it seemed as though Serena might argue, but instead, she simply nodded, her shoulders slumping. "Come on, Brielle," she said, her voice hollow. "Let's go." Brielle hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the elevator bank as though hoping her father might appear. But when it became clear he wouldn't, she rose silently and followed her mother out the door. That evening, Kellen sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. On his desk sat a folder filled with documents detailing the next phase of Pyre Technologies' expansion. He had always been meticulous about planning, ensuring that every decision was calculated, every risk measured. But tonight, his thoughts wandered, unbidden, to the encounter that hadn't happened. He thought of Serena's determination to mold their lives into the image of wealth and status, and how that pursuit had ultimately left her with nothing. He thought of Brielle's once bright curiosity, dimmed by misplaced priorities and Serena's influence. And he thought of the quiet moments, long gone, when they had felt like a family. Dane arrived, his usual confidence tempered with concern. He poured a glass of whiskey and handed it to Kellen. "So, they showed up," he said, sitting across from him. "They did," Kellen replied, his tone neutral. "And you sent them away?" "Yes." Dan studied him for a moment before speaking. "Do you ever wonder if you're being too hard on them?" Kellen took a sip of his drink, the amber liquid warming his throat. "No," he said firmly. "They made their choice. They left when it mattered most, and they did it without looking back. I owe them nothing." But Brielle chose Serena's vision of success over loyalty to her father, Kellen interrupted, his voice colder now. "She mocked me. She dismissed me. And now, when the life they chose has fallen apart, they come back expecting forgiveness." Danny nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Kellen returned to his desk after Danley left, his focus shifting back to the documents before him. The numbers and projections brought him clarity, a reminder of the world he had built, not out of revenge, but out of belief in his own potential. He no longer needed the approval of Serena or Brielle, nor did he crave their acknowledgement of his success. Success wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to himself that he was capable of greatness, independent of their choices or opinions. It was about living a life defined by his values: persistence, integrity, and vision. At the edge of the city, in their modest apartment, Serena sat staring at a blank wall, the weight of rejection settling over her. Brielle, curled up in the corner of the room, scrolled aimlessly through her phone, stopping on another article about her father's latest venture. The headline read, "Tech Titan Kellen Hayes invests in education for the underserved." She stared at his photo for a long moment, her chest tightening. She wanted to reach out again, to try one more time, but something in his expression, the quiet strength, the unwavering determination, told her it would be futile. Back in his office, Kellen glanced at the same photo on the wall. It was of him standing with a group of students, their faces alight with curiosity and hope. He smiled faintly, a genuine moment of pride breaking through. He had moved on, and now there was no room for doubt or regret. The past was behind him, and the future was his alone to define. And with that, Kellen Hayes returned to his work, ready to build the next chapter of his legacy. The city stretched out before him, a dazzling mosaic of lights that seemed to pulse with life and possibility. Kellen Hayes stood at the edge of his penthouse balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand, the cool evening breeze brushing against his face. He gazed at the skyline, his reflection faintly mirrored in the glass railing. A man transformed by the trials and triumphs of the past decade. For years, the weight of proving himself had driven him, fueled by the betrayal and dismissal of those he once held closest. He had worked tirelessly, pouring his pain into purpose, his doubt into determination. And now, the fruits of that labor stood undeniable. $1 billion company, a respected legacy, and a reputation as one of the most innovative minds in the tech world. But it wasn't just about the accolades. Kellen knew his success wasn't measured by the wealth he had amassed or the magazine covers that bore his name. It was in the lives he had impacted, the employees whose careers he had nurtured, the students whose futures were brighter because of his scholarship programs, the communities transformed by his vision. And that meaning was its own reward. For a moment, his thoughts drifted to the shadows of his past. Serena and Brielle's departure had once felt like a wound that would never heal. But now, that pain seemed distant, like an old scar, visible but no longer tender. Their choices had shaped them just as his choices had shaped him. And while he wished them no harm, he knew he had made the right decision in closing that chapter of his life. He took a slow sip of his drink, savoring the warmth that spread through his chest. This was what freedom felt like. Freedom from the need for validation, from the ghosts of disappointment, from the burdens of his past. As he turned back toward his office, the faint glow of his monitors casting light onto the polished floor, Kellen allowed himself a small smile. His reflection caught his eye once more, and this time he saw not a man haunted by betrayal, but one defined by resilience and vision. He had built something lasting, something that mattered. And in the quiet of that moment, Kellen Hayes knew he was exactly where he was meant to be.